So, hi guys. Welcome to the 15th monthly meeting of the UK MTB Trail Alliance. And in a minute, I will hand you over to Graeme Berry, who is the chair of the Tayside Trail Association, who's going to talk us through many different aspects, maybe not all, but many different aspects of the Tayside Trail Association, its history, how it came about, how they run themselves. And hopefully, there's an awful lot for all of us to learn from that. And then after he's done that, we'll do a Q&A as usual, and then we'll open up the floor for people to ask questions of each other in case there's any problems that anyone wants to share to get people's advice on. But before we start, a bit of housekeeping. If you could use the little hands up icon at the bottom of the screen so I know you want to speak, that would be great, and I'll call people in turn. When asking your question, please say who you are and what group you're from. And can I ask that you please leave your video on during the call so we can all see each other, but please stay muted. And then also, if you can, please change your display name to include the organisation you represent. So you can see, as you see, mine is Robin Grant, UK MTB Trail Alliance. So without further ado, I will hand over to Graeme.
Hi, everyone. Is that me? I am unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Actually, you jump about these days between Teams and Zoom. It's just like, which button does what? So yeah, first of all, I've got a wee touch of the man flu, so you'll have to bear with me if I get a bit croaky. But I'll try my best. So I've put together a few wee slides. Just get that open. So I will share my screen and get started. So hopefully that's sharing. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, first of all, thanks Robin for the opportunity to come and to give you a wee bit of a background to what we do. For those of you that don't know where we are, Tayside is sort of in the middle and to the east, and we've got two major cities, Perth and Dundee, which are, we can't see them, I should draw them on the map there and there. And within Tayside, we have five principal areas, well, four and a half. Pitmedden, Ballow and Halliburton, Kinole and Duchney and Dunkeld, and we're in the process of speaking to some of the guys in Pitlochry at the moment, so I've put them on the map, but they're not sort of officially a trail crew yet. So the background to how this all came about was that each of these locations had enduro races taking part throughout the 2010s, and the organisers and people behind those races all were dealing with much the same people at Forestry and Land Scotland and various other landowners and coming across a lot of the same issues. So decided basically to all kind of join up into a big super trail crew. So that structure still kind of carries through, that we are very much a sort of confederation of independent groups rather than being one big top-down organisation. So it's all very distributed and communal. So as much as I am the chair, that's pretty much a formality really for constitutional purposes, and each crew we all kind of manage ourselves and deal with bits and pieces in each area, and generally the more little things are, the less other crews will get involved, and for things like insurance and dealing with forestry, the bigger scale issues, we all come together and help each other out. It does help that we all get along and we all ride in each other's areas all the time. It's a fairly small area. But we do have quite a lot of trails. So I think Robin's survey that he talked us through a couple of months back, we're actually apparently the largest trail association. We've got somewhere around 535 different tracks and trails across the five areas. And that's nearly 500 kilometres of trails. Now, there will be some bits of access path and forest road in there as well, because I just pulled those numbers off Trailforks. But there is still an awful lot of stuff, and we do a reasonable amount of work on walkers' paths and fire roads and things as well, just as part of our general stewardship, I guess. You can't ride a bike up a blocked forest road. So, the big thing that enables us to do quite a lot of this is obviously the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, which gives us the not quite the right to roam, but I guess the right to responsible access to land. But it is the right to responsible access, and there are conditions on that. It's not just do whatever you like, wherever you like. Basically, it just sort of boils down to not being a dick. And if everybody involved in the outdoors and enjoying the outdoors sticks to that, then we're fine. So obviously we can't go and ride our bikes through an active forestry site, we can't go and ride our bikes through a farm, but equally landowners have there's sort of a presumption that it's okay for us to be there as long as we're not causing any damage or interfering with anything. You obviously can't ride through somebody's back garden or anything silly like that, but within reason, we can go and explore as much as we like, which is handy for fire roads. Now, this particular case was it's not the most official looking sign, but it is actually an official job where the right of access through this area, which is actually just up the back of my house here. They were rebuilding all the roads to do a load of extraction work after Storm Éowyn. So it's pretty reasonable for them to say we've got excavators and diggers and everything like that. And in this case, we're able to hopefully put that message out to mountain bikers and help forestry maintain safe working environments. And for a lot of these things, if they're doing clearance work, the less time they have to spend chasing mountain bikers around and shouting at people, the quicker the work happens, the happier everybody is. Another sort of quirk of this is another one of my wee backyard bits where I ride my bike occasionally. This is not particularly a trail that's been built, but it's basically where people have enjoyed their right of responsible access over this particular part of the forest repeatedly for the last 20 odd years, and now a trail has appeared. So it's not so this trail has been built, but it now exists, and there is a trail there, and people have a right to be there and are allowed to walk along it. So a lot of the bike trails, some of them start life as things like this, and then are adapted over the years. So we have this kind of quirk that we have the right to be in these places, not necessarily the right to work on them, but trails can sort of develop organically. Most of bike trails, to be fair, don't, but it is possible that a trail can appear entirely unplanned, like this one here. And some of those we take a degree of stewardship over. So if some of these trees fall down and we know it's in an area where people are walking and doing things, then as responsible users of the outdoors, if we can clear those, if we can fix those issues, or if we can report them to landowners if we can't deal with them, then it's an important part of what we do as a trail association. So most of our trails are Forestry and Land Scotland land. So most of the time we're dealing with those. A few of the trails in Dunkeld are on private estates, which makes things a little bit easier in some respects and a little bit harder in others. The main one being if you're dealing with Forestry and Land Scotland, it's pretty much the same situation, regardless of where you're digging. So we have the same sort of requirements for paperwork, the same sort of requirements and restrictions on what we're allowed to do. But it is a little bit more restrictive. So if we're dealing with a private estate and we want to go in with bulldozers and diggers and stuff, as long as we can negotiate that with them and they're happy that everything's in place to do that, then that's fine. With forestry, there's a few extra hoops we'd have to jump through in order to do that, which I'll come on to a wee bit later on. But the first step with all of our work with FLS is submitting these plans, which are all developed through the IMBA dirt training that we did with Timbins. And we have, I think, around 15 trained trail coordinators now who've been through that, which covers doing the inspections, assessments, preparing dig plans, and all that kind of thing. But basically what we do is make sure that we're explicitly clear where we're going to be, what we're doing, and things like clearing vegetation and things we don't have to be too specific about, but anything that's very disruptive is probably not the right word, but anything that has a higher impact than just clearing a few bushes, we have to be pretty explicit about what we're doing. So we'll submit a load of photographs saying, we're doing exactly this day. These particular plans here, this was for our evening digs that we ran last year. So we did a dig day every week after work, basically different days. The idea being that nobody had an excuse that they couldn't do a Thursday because they were scattered around. Some were Tuesdays, some were Mondays, some were Thursdays. So what we did was basically prepared an enormous dig plan that covered an entire summer and agreed various tasks with forestry, went and walked particular areas of the trails to make sure we were all on the same page as to what exactly was happening. And then we had the big list of tasks, big list of dates, and then depending on volunteer numbers, weather conditions, we could then adjust the plans accordingly. So we had a much more approved, rather than being specific, we're doing this on this day. So we actually did really well with that. We got through most of them, and I think just about every dig we had one new person came along, and we gained a few extra regulars along the way, which was quite good. The purpose of it was to boost numbers and get people coming along. And a lot of the time, we'll fix a single berm, fix a single jump, that kind of thing, and then session it until it gets dark. So it worked pretty well as a sort of social thing. But the main thing that we work on or the main thing that forestry like us to work on, so the top priority as far as they're concerned, is safety issues, which is things like this. Basically, this is an exit onto a fire road, which has basically no sight lines at all. This is actually a ballow, and what you maybe can't quite see from the photo is that between those trees is a pretty steep drop. So you're completely committed to going through those trees. You're going onto the fire road at speed, and there's not really an awful lot anyone could do about it. And we wouldn't ever choose to build something like that, but because of how this is working, it's not very easy to reroute this to get a different angle. So what we've basically done is cleared enough vegetation out of there that you can pretty much see, as you're coming down the trail, you can see if there's anybody on the fire road. And if you're coming up the fire road, then you can see whether anybody's, well, you can't necessarily see anybody coming down the trail, but you can see that you can see there is a trail there. So it's a lot more obvious. And that's one of the principal concerns that forestry have, is that people come piling out onto fire roads at speed. They're not quite so concerned about the safety of the rider, but more third parties who might be have somebody come crashing into them. This is kind of the other view, so you can see the difference in the overgrown areas. And quite a lot of the next few months is probably going to be spent redoing a lot of this. This was 2023, and it's not quite as badly grown back as that, but it does definitely need a bit of a trim now. The other thing they're not so keen on is timber features. So this was a timber feature at one point. It's a big catch berm at the bottom of a rock slab, and it's pretty much deteriorated to the point where it more or less fell apart when we repaired it last year, tail end of last year. And basically we go around rebuilding all these things in rock wherever we can. So obviously a lot of this stuff was built by sort of one or two people at a time. So they've not had necessarily the amount of labor to drag these big heavy rocks around. So we kept the basic structure is more or less the same. The trail is effectively the same, except for what was timber is now rock. And this is also quite a good example of things we do that people occasionally accuse us of dumbing things down, making things too simple. But this is still a pretty ferociously gnarly rock slab. There's no two ways about it. It's probably maybe only 1 in 10 people who would ride up at Ballow that would even think about attempting it. So it's it's a bit of a fun one. I certainly wouldn't go anywhere near it on a bike, that's for sure. But it now has a nice, solid, safe catch berm at the bottom. So it's removing the random element of the rotten timber and making everything a lot more solid and a lot more predictable. So there's no surprises. And there's several similar features further up the trail as well. So it's not like you're kind of thrown into this. But because obviously working with forestry rather than doing all this stuff means we can use not quite any equipment we like, but we can drag an awful lot of stuff up and down the hills and use vehicles to access things, which makes a huge difference in terms of getting into some of the more remote areas and moving things around that occasionally we can't find rocks where we need them to. So move a couple of pickup loads of rock to where we need it to be. We can't generally import materials from off-site, but in the case of this is a Ballow where there's a forestry borrow pit at the bottom of the hill, which is the same geology as where the trails are. So we're able to move material from the bottom of the trail basically to the top of the trail to repair a horrible boggy mess with pallets and all sorts of horrible stuff. But over the years, people have basically just thrown more and more junk into to try and make it dry out. It's never really worked. What it actually is a forwarder trail from a long time ago that funnels all the water into this precise spot, which is where the trails go through. So because we could move material around, take volunteers and tools and things up the hill, excuse me, we've been able to rebuild basically rock armor, the whole thing. We've got about 2/3 of the climb up there done. And you can tell where we ran out of time. Definitely get pitched back into bog again at the end of it. But the trail basically through there is probably about a foot deep of rock. We reckon we must have moved probably somewhere near 15 tons of rock to get that done, which is obviously pretty infeasible without landowners' permission and ability to use vehicles and things like that. The other thing we could do with that is get more people involved and more groups involved. This is a group from Dundee University Mountain and Road Cycling Club, who approached us last year to discuss doing joint dig days, basically. Obviously, students coming from all over the country to study in Dundee. Most of them end up riding, if they ride bikes, of course, riding at the trails that we look after. So they were quite keen to put something back into the area, because obviously we have all the necessary bits and pieces and insurance, all this kind of thing, landowner permission. We can work with clubs and organisations to pull that together. And in this case, we got them to reinstate bits of trail that had been lost to Clearfell. So again, we went out with forestry, did surveys, picked a line, and so on. And where there was 3 trails before through the Clearfell zone, there's now one that kind of pulls everything together into one area. And it also has the effect of taking traffic off the fire road. So it separates walkers and mountain bikers a little bit more. And yeah, it turned out quite well. Unfortunately, this particular section is a fantastic big sort of double S berm thing. Now has a couple of trees down over it after last weekend, so we're going to have to go back in and do a bit more work on it to hopefully clear some of that out. But again, it's a good way of getting people involved and getting people digging and contributing back to the trails, who otherwise maybe wouldn't. So in return for letting us do all this kind of stuff, what forestry get is hundreds of eyes telling them exactly where problems are. So this is actually Storm Éowyn rather than Éowyn. But what we can do is through our trail forks and all the rest of it, given it back across Tayside over the last couple of weeks, has been feeding information back to FLS visitor services managers and plan managers about exactly where problems are, where trees are down. So within, I guess, a couple of days of the storm, they had a list, or Forestry and Land Scotland had a list with grid references, photographs, pretty well documented, every priority route, core paths, all pretty much mapped out straight away, which would probably have taken them a wee bit longer to do. So they're then able to prioritise their clearance efforts. Some of them we did ourselves, which is this was particularly it was blocking a fairly major trail, but there's enough of us that we thought we'd have a go at it with the handsaws, and it was pretty safe, just a single tree, so there was no real issues clearing it. It's just a case of chopping into logs, and it's amazing what you can clear if there's enough of you and you're persistent enough with the handsaw. And this is actually yesterday at Pitben, which got hit hardest. It was pretty much right in the red storm warning zone. So it's had more or less, it was a good few trail closures across the whole area. But we had, I think, about 10, 15 people went in over the course of the weekend, clearing trees, clearing brush, and it's now mostly back open again. Certainly all the major trails and all the most commonly used trails are all now back open again. And the bits that are left, we're hoping some forestry crews will be able to get in there and help us clear some of the bigger trees, some of the more awkward trees. Because obviously we're not allowed to use any sort of power tools. So everything has to be done with handsaws and axes and things like that, which makes things an awful lot slower than it would be otherwise. Although it's not strictly true that we can't use power tools. There is ways we can do it. We just have to be more or less contractors. So there's routes to using these systems. We just have to prepare risk assessments, prepare statements, and do things more or less the same way as a forestry contractor would. Now, we have a couple of volunteers who are fully windblow ticketed and do tender for FLS contracts. Unfortunately, we can't just contract them to do it. It's not quite that simple. But we are discussing with forestry whether or what exactly we would need to do enable the use of some of these things. It's not just chainsaws and things like that, but also potentially in some areas mini diggers and things like that if it's appropriate to do so. So to a certain extent, we would then have to become a contractor, a forestry contractor, but there is ways that can be done. It's just whether that's feasible for a trail association to do that, which is something that we're discussing amongst ourselves as well. There's only so much you can do as a voluntary organisation, but if it means we can get things like this up and running quicker, and if there's people involved in the process who are able to do these things more or less in the course of their day job. So, for example, my background's in civil engineering. We've got a couple of other people with similar sort of engineering jobs, some of whom, like I say, work on Forestry and Land Scotland contracts anyway. So, things like CDM regulations, health and safety bits and pieces, risk assessments, it's not quite as scary as if you're just a trail builder who digs stuff in the woods. So there may be ways we can expand things a wee bit. We become a wee bit more professionalized and more contractor-like, and forestry give us clear guidance on how to do that. We could hopefully be somewhere in the middle. But some of the other things we do, obviously, this was a big community outreach project that we did last year with Trash-Free Trails and Warby, which pulled together a lot of kids' mountain bike clubs from Perth, but people from across Scotland to come and do a big combined litter picking session across Cunhill Hill in Perth. And do some trail building as well, and all go out for a ride. We had demo days, variety of demo bikes. I think we had pizza as well, all sorts of things. So that was one of our not just building trails activities. And we also ran an event. This was 2023, which was again aimed at outreach to the community, getting more people involved in digging and riding, which was called On Your Bike, which was part of UCI's Power of the Bike campaign, or sorry, Visit Scotland's Power of the Bike campaign around the UCI World Championships. So there's a few bits and pieces that we get involved in that aren't necessarily fixing trails. There's a school of thought that we should probably just stick to fixing berms and clearing drains and stuff like that. But a lot of these extra tasks, extra things that we take on, are essentially a form of marketing to try and get more people involved, to try and expand the image of the Trail Association, I suppose, make people aware of these. We've also done film premieres. We had the UK premiere of Anthill Films, I forgot what it's called, last year, which again was really good. Got everybody together into a group, and we also ran a jump competition, which was again up at Cunhill and Juchny in Perth, which brought a lot of people from across Tayside to come and have listen to some tunes, ride in the park, and hopefully gained us a few extra volunteers in the process as well. So in the future, we kind of aim to do more bits and pieces and stuff like that. Not quite becoming developing mountain biking in Tayside, but fairly close. And we're also involved with Tim Binns on their project to boost mountain biking businesses and things in Perthshire. So they've done similar in Aberdeenshire and in the Tweed Valley. And Perthshire also has a cluster, which is very early stages, but it's bringing together all the people involved in running mountain biking facilities and businesses and community outreach and things to try and pull everybody together to develop a coordinated strategy for what we can do. So we're involved in loads of things besides trails. And yeah, I think that's my last slide. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea. And yeah, if you want to fire away with questions, I'll stop my screen share.
Cool. Sorry. Cool. Thanks, Graeme. So while everyone is thinking of their questions, I will ask a couple. So I suppose just going back to, the beginning of the TCA. I mean, you mentioned that it sort of originated out of these different groups running enduro races at different locations across the region. What then prompted you all to get together and actually form the Trail Association? What was the trigger?
So really it's to do with dealing with organisations like Forestry and Land Scotland. Because they're a big organisation, they don't necessarily want to be dealing with individual trail builders or individual groups. The bigger an organisation you can be, the easier it is for them to deal with as an institution. So not necessarily the individual area managers, but their bosses, if you like. If they're dealing with a proper constituted group that has proper insurance, proper constitutions, proper pedigree, I suppose, it's just an awful lot easier for them as a body to deal with that because it's more like what they're used to. So similar to what I was saying about getting involved with doing more involved trail building tasks. It's not so much that they flat out will not do it. It's just that there has to be a recognizable process for them to work through, something that's aligned with how they work as an organization. And basically, the bigger a body you are, and the more people are, the more ground you cover, the easier it is for everybody. So if anything happens at any one of our 4 sites, our forestry manager knows there's only one person he has to phone. He doesn't have to phone 4 people, it's just one. So it simplifies a lot of things.
Okay, and so literally they suggested it to some of those guys saying, "Why don't you all get together?"
More the reverse. Everybody obviously was involved in organising races across the initial 4 areas, and because of that, there's a lot of maintenance work and a lot of permissions, and a lot of to and froing with FLS. And out of that, it's just, well, why are we doing all this separately? Why are we having 4 sets of insurance? Why don't we just all get together? And as I say, it helps that everybody kind of knows each other. It's not the biggest area. Everybody gets on it. Everybody rides in everybody else's trails. So it just makes sense, including our forestry visitor manager. He rides and does various outdoor things as well, which definitely helps as far as all that goes. So yeah, it's really just an economy of scale, but not just financially, but in terms of effort and permission, and it's just an awful lot easier.
Okay, and how long ago was that when sort of those groups coalesced into?
So that was 2020.
Right.
So we're still kind of still relatively new as an organization, but the various component parts go back to I guess probably sort of 2008, 2009, and the start of some of the enduro races around here. So the Fair City Enduro, Muckmeadow, and the Dunkeld Enduro obviously was running. Highland Burster Enduro was running for a good few years. So there was a pretty well established working relationship between all the various individuals involved, of which I wasn't one, I hasten to add. I only got involved in 2021, so I'm a relatively newcomer. So there was already that pre-existing relationship. So it was more just a case of formalizing and simplifying that rather than turning everything on its head, if you like.
Okay, and I'm gonna pick up on that word formalising. So I presume once you came together as the TTA, they wanted as an entity that they could have a contract with. I presume they wanted a contract in place. Talk to us a bit about that. How long that took.
So
How arduous it was.
it's
What the
it's
terms
kind
were.
so it's kind of an ongoing thing. They have basically standard contracts for everything, and it's really just a case of negotiating bits and pieces, and it's really not especially complicated. It's just agreeing things like sort of minimum terms for how long, how much notice we have to give for certain things, what levels of insurance are required. But because it's a sort of standardized agreement that's much the same as you would have with any other contractor working in the forest or an event organizer, it's not particularly, it's tweaked a little bit, and it's still, I guess, an evolving process because initially it was, here's our standard thing. You have to follow these boxes exactly. And as things go on and as you develop a degree of trust, that we've been doing this quite a while now, and for want of a better term, nothing bad's happened. It then becomes easier for us to say, right, okay, can we move towards, or can we look at moving towards and start negotiating a more, maybe a more stewardship based, not quite them turning over control to us, but we have a bit more flexibility as to how we do things. So instead of being, so the weekly digs is a good example of that. Instead of being, we are doing this on this date, it's like we're going to do all this work on these dates. So they know what's happening. They can notify us of any works that are going on that would affect that, or any other access requirements that would affect that. but at the same time, exactly how that operates on the day, we have a bit more flexibility about. So moving towards that kind of thing, again, the more we can demonstrate that we appreciate their concerns and appreciate the way they need things to be done, and as long as everything's documented in a way that they can use to throughout the organization, then yeah, it's an evolving process. What we would really like is a sort of situation where we can have a lot more control over what's going on. So almost similar to how a bike park would operate, but it's going to be an awful long time before we get anything like that. But if there's a position where trail associations can effectively manage the mountain bike trails on Forestry and Land Scotland's behalf, that would be fantastic, or any other landowner, to be fair.
Yeah.
Still probably quite a long way off that, but it's a process we have. Again, it's rights and responsibilities. You know, we have to demonstrate that we are working towards that and taking that on and working in ways that they can work with, and hopefully they reciprocate and start loosening up some of the things that we're allowed to do. But you know, early days.
And just so I understand and others understand, you sort of you've shifted from having to submit fairly detailed plans for individual dig days, saying you're going to do X and Y on X trail, to now sort of notifying them of a whole chunk of work that you're going to do, but you end up doing that work on, you know, as you see fit on different dig days.
It,
Right?
it depends exactly what the work is. So anything really significant, like you know, putting in substantial diversions or rebuilding major features, that we would still be quite detailed and prescriptive about. But the sort of more general stuff like filling holes, filling and breaking bumps, resurfacing bits of trail, clearing drains, clearing vegetation, clearing sight lines, all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of bread and butter of what we do. That's the kind of stuff that they're a bit more relaxed about managing things. So, you know, we might decide if there's only two of us on the hill, it might be like, right, okay, well, so we'll take a wander up with a couple of mattocks, clear out a few drains, maybe clear some bushes. You know, nothing major, but mostly what we'll be doing is inspecting what's going on, checking the trails. But if we get 10 people, it could be like, right, okay, well, now we've got enough people, we can reopen an old borrow pit, we can start taking barrow loads up and down, fix these breaking bumps, maybe resurface a berm that's collapsing, something like that. So big stuff, yeah, we still have to be really prescriptive about. But the sort of day-to-day of things, we can have that bit more flexibility back.
Okay, so all you really need to inform Forestry and Land Scotland in that case is, in those instances, that sort of day-to-day stuff, is it just that you're going to be on the forest on a certain day, basically?
Exactly, yeah. So it's again, that's just to make sure that there's no conflicts with any other uses. So if there's any, most of the time there's not, but there could be felling operations, there could be contractors going to do something, any number of things that would restrict us from working on those days. So
Okay, makes sense. And you talked about how many, well, a ridiculously large amount of trails that you guys are responsible for maintaining.
yeah,
So how does that? And obviously there were four groups originally, and now potentially a fifth that's just sort of
yeah.
photogenic. How many dig days do you end up doing a year, and how many? You know, like give us a sense of scale of the number of volunteers and the number of times.
Okay, so as I said, we've got about I think about 15 dig leaders, split more or less equally between the original four. We're still haven't got any dig leaders in place in Pitlochry yet. Um, all of whom have been through the dirt training, and all of whom are have outdoor first aid qualifications, so we can all run digs independently of each other, basically. Last year, we set ourselves the challenge of running a dig every a weekly dig night through the summer. So from when the clocks changed to when the clocks changed back, which we kept going for the whole of the summer. So I couldn't actually tell you how many days that is, but it's quite a few. We've got, I think, about 8 dig days coming up between now and April across those 4 areas. A couple in Haliburton, a couple of Barlow. Obviously, we had a dig weekend just gone there at Pitmedden, which was a fairly last minute one, sort of all hands on deck. All the trails are blocked, let's clear them all, sort of thing. So we have a fair few dig days a year, certainly. In terms of regular volunteers, I guess probably about 40 or 50 regulars, probably, and then probably about the same again and occasional people over the course of a year. But then again, we'll have days like the Dundee Uni dig where we have sort of 15 complete novices who've never dug before. Actually, that's not true. A couple of them have, but we do occasionally have these situations where we get a lot more. Or like the event we did with Tay Titans and Trash Free Trails, where you have sort of 50 kids and volunteers from all over the place, and you have to kind of all scramble to one area and figure things out. But again, we keep everything fairly organized between us. So if there is a particularly big dig going on in one location, then coordinators from other areas might go and help out and so on. So
Cool, makes sense. And so when you said one a week during the summer, that's not one at each of the areas. That's one at
no,
one of the
that's
areas.
one.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, we did have a couple that ran concurrently last year, but yeah, that's the idea. Most of them tended to be at Ballow last year, just because it's kind of fallen a bit behind previous years, and there was an awful lot to catch up on. But again, it depends what work is needing done. But as we're a fairly distributed, say, democratic organisation, I guess, it's really up to each individual each individual dig leader how many digs they want to do. So some of us enjoy it. I wouldn't say enjoy it more than others because we all enjoy it, but some people have more free time. Some people would rather just dig in the winter. So, for example, one of our coordinators at Pitmen, he doesn't do any digs at all over the summer at all, but he's out. Well, has literally been out on the hill every day since Storm Éowyn, cutting things and clearing things, and But then once it's summer, that's riding time, and that's totally fine. So it's up to each individual dig leader how often they want to organise digs. We don't sort of be like, right, you must do 10 digs a year or you're kicked out, sort of thing. It's very much on each individual dig leader, how much or how little they want to do.
Cool, that makes sense. And do you find that people just stick to one area, or I've actually got loads of people that will, wherever you've got a dig day, they'll turn up for it, or is it some mixture of the two?
It's a mix actually. We probably have each area has its own locals who ride there all the time and tend to prioritize digging there. But equally, we all do ride in all the other areas, and so we do sort of mix things up. So my home hill is Ballow and Halliburton, which is certainly where I lead most of the digs. But I've been to the odd dig day at Chiefney and Dunkeld as well. And it's also, we find it's a really good way to get to know other areas. So if you always ride in Dunkeld, but you want to start exploring other areas, come along to a few dig days, and it gives you it's a really good way to learn the trails and see things and figure out exactly what's going on. And we also get quite a lot of people who are new to the area come along to digs looking to get to know people to ride with, but also get to know which trails are where and what trails are within their limits, I guess. It gives you a good sense of what you're letting yourself in for if you go riding.
Makes sense. Right, Jez has had his hand up for a while. You're still on mute, Jez.
I know that's. I've got to move my fingers around, mate.
Sorry.
It's just a quick question about the health and safety and the training. Who paid for that?
Donations.
That everybody's got, because you say you got 50 people who've all been trained.
So no, the dig leaders are trained, 15. So we have about 15 trained leaders, yeah. But it's all entirely funded by donations. So we have.
Right, so the Forestry haven't contributed anything to that.
No, nothing whatsoever. No, they might have occasionally but as far as I'm aware, no. But they maybe did originally, but so they certainly have no formalized way of doing so. But what we have is at some trailheads and in pretty much every local bike-related business, QR codes that you can scan to take you straight to donation pages. And yeah, it's pretty much all funded by donations from riders. And it's about as good a vote of confidence as you can get. People can say nice things or nasty things about you on Instagram all they want, but when you're literally able to say, right, you guys can get first aid training paid for. It's paid for by the riders who are actually going and riding those trails, and it's an amazing feeling when you're able to say, like, well, okay, people are actually willing to pay us to do this.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, where I am, the forestry have paid for first aid courses, and yeah, I think it's. Well, I say they've paid. But what they do is they set up first aid courses, and if they have a few spare places, they'll put the word out. Who's out of date on their first aid? Or I've got a couple of places. Do you want to go? So if you turn up, they get for free, which is great because it saves us 300 or 400 quid every time. So I've got Forestry Plus, etc., and I think with 2 or 3 lads who have all been paid by forestry, and every now and again they'll say, "Oh, we've got this course. Anybody want to do it?" So they've obviously got a couple of spare places.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever come up with forestry. We've definitely done some bits and pieces with Perth and Kinross Council. They're some of the trails at Kinnell and Duchney, half the hill is Forestry and Land Scotland land, the other half is Perth and Kinross Council. And their green space team have done training with some of the dig team in Perth on the use of streamers and flails and things like that, which we're allowed to use on Perth and Kinross land, but not on forestry land. Again, just because you have to be a Forestry and Land Scotland approved contractor to do certain things. And, theoretically we could be, but presently we're not. Whereas Perth and Kinross Council, if they say it's fine, then it's fine. So, if we have the necessary tickets and permissions and whatever, then they're happy with that. Likewise, the estates, they're quite happy for the use of power tools, but that really only applies in some areas.
Yeah,
Jez, sorry, Jez.
No, sorry, I'm done, mate. Thank you.
I was just going to say, it's also worth remembering that the dirt course is about half the cost of the ATB course that people end up doing in down south, which may make a small difference, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hugely expensive course now.
No. Yeah. Mark from Lochaber.
Hi, Graeme. How you doing?
Hi.
Yeah, not too far away from you.
No, not at all.
I've got a couple of questions. So how are you? I see you're still using Eventbrite. Are you? How are you attracting people to digs? What's your favourite way?
Oh, the part of the whole idea of doing the weekly digs was basically around that. Think of it as like a dig day taster session. So what we did was it didn't quite work in practice how we wanted last year, but we'll hopefully do it more this year. The idea was let's pick a single feature, let's fix it, build it, session it, get GoPros out, film it, post the whole lot on Instagram, and kind of try and get more of a kind of tap into the let's get lots of content out of it. Yeah, we kind of fell down on the content part because we drag all cameras up the hill and then get carried away writing things and digging things and forget to actually take any pictures of anything. But the idea was basically that's your kind of, have you ever come to a dig day before? No. Okay, well, come along, and worst case, you can dig for half an hour and then ride your bike the rest of the time. It was a sort of very informal thing, which we'll definitely do again this year. The Eventbrite's really just a booking thing. We don't really use that as a marketing tool, particularly. But it's basically just mostly through social media and through, as I say, just kind of reaching out and trying to lower the bar a little bit. So it's not like, oh, we're going to come along and we're going to be heaving rocks about for a whole day. It's like, no, there's tasks we can fit to everybody. And obviously reaching out to like Dundee Uni, Tay Titans, local bike shops and local businesses. It just gives you that little bit more, we sort of set ourselves the goal that if we have one new person on every dig day who's never been there before, then we're kind of doing okay on that score. And we mostly achieved that. And we've built a pretty decent regular crew around each one as well. So yeah, it's not setting the bar too high, I think was kind of the challenge with that. Of just, right, we're not necessarily going to get 50 people turning up to every dig. But if we can just get a couple more and get everybody spreading the word.
We tended to find that everything would drop off in the winter and people weren't as keen. So you get like down to like 5s and 6s sort of thing rather than like 10s or 15s.
I think it depends what's going on as well. And obviously with the storms over the winter, there was a definite sense of, right, everybody's all hands on deck with this one. And we had, I think certainly every crew had at least 5 or 6 regulars out within a couple of days after everything had settled, going out mapping things, figuring things out, and really just pushing the the information gathering aspect of things a wee bit has helped a lot this last winter. That you can either donate financially, you can donate your time on a dig day, or you can donate information, letting us know where problems are. Obviously, we're all Trailforks admins, so if somebody posts a Trailforks issue, then we know about that straight away, and we can kind of tailor that a little bit. So, which is really helpful with such a big area. That if we know exactly where the problems are, we can just be like, right, okay, well, we don't really know what is going on. We know there's a tree down up there. We can just go and deal with that without having to go and see what's going on first. So that kind of has helped quite a lot.
Good. We moved away from Eventbrite because we just didn't really feel like it was fitting us very well. But I keep seeing other people using it and then thinking that, oh, should I be using it?
It's really just a booking tool. What we've also done is we have each crew has its own kind of individual WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Once you come along a couple of times and you're a regular, if you like, we'll add you to the group, and then it's kind of obviously, as long as we're within our ratios of for health and safety and all the rest of it. If we have 5 people, we might only have one person sign up on Eventbrite, but we've got a few others that we know are coming anyway. So it's kind of.
So the last question, then I'll shut up. Was you said about getting donations and stuff, and how are you doing that? Is that through Trail Karma, or is that through charity, or?
So we've got Trail Karma set up, Trailforks, and we also have a Square payment account, which is just literally you scan the QR code, it takes you to the page, you enter how much you want to donate, bang, there you go. That's it.
And are you getting a decent amount in? Are you getting quite a lot of revenue from that, or?
Yeah, I mean it's enough to cover our costs anyway and keep things going. Yeah. I can't remember exactly. It's very few. It's a large number of fairly small donations, so like a 10 or 20 quid there, so on.
Right.
But yeah, it's a reasonable amount, and there's no real effort involved in doing it. You know, once you set it up, that's it. I think Square takes 0.5% or 1.5% of every transaction or something like that. But we have have I got one kicking about here? No, I don't think I do. We've got some basically just printed Fomex signs. You know, this is who we are. This is what we do. I scan here, and we'll put them basically bungeed around things, which keeps forestry relatively happy because they're not permanent signs. And every bike shop it helps that most of the bike shops are staffed by dig leaders. They're quite good at kind of evangelizing as well. But they all have the QR codes as well. So yeah, it just kind of trickles in here and there, and it's quite impressive. And you'll see, especially after big events, like we've had quite a lot of donations. I think off the top of my head about 150, 200 quid in the last couple of weeks, just since the storm, since we've been doing all the work clearing. So there's definitely a increasing feeling of, well, we need to contribute something to this. And it's just basically making it as easy as possible for people. If all you literally have to do is pull out your phone and scan it. It also takes you to the Trailforks page for the area as well. So if you want to find out where you are, similar to the signs that TBTA have put up, they may have stolen part of that idea from us.
Hi.
But ours are a bit simpler.
Nice one. Thank you, and good luck with tree clearing.
We're actually not doing too badly. I think there's still a few to go at Pitmedden, but all 4 areas, don't know about Lochaber, but all the 4 of our main areas, you could now go and ride pretty much everything. Certainly all the main trails. So we're just about done.
Last year, I think we were the only trail association that had like loads of trails closed, and then everybody else was fine. But this year, we're the only one that doesn't. So we're quite lucky.
Yeah, it's
here we were not. We are lucky. So, right.
Pretty much any storm that's got a name, we're going to lose one or two trails, at least temporarily. We have lost a couple permanently, to be fair, I think. But again, if we could go out with chainsaws and winches and all the rest of it, we could probably do something with them. But you have to pick your battles. So there's definitely a couple that will be gone and not coming back. But we'll see what we can do about that. Forestry are occasionally quite accommodating. If an area has been destroyed by windblow, they will let us divert things and reroute things. And yeah, we have to negotiate that a wee bit, but they're usually open to talking about it at least. So
nice one. Right, thanks, Graeme. I'm going to go back onto mute now, and then I'll let other people speak. Cheers.
All right, well, other people have a chance to formulate their questions again. We've just been talking about the storm. Can you give us an idea of, take a step back, how badly were all of your trails hit? Was it equally across all of your areas? What percentage of trails got taken out? How did you go about organising afterwards, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so it wasn't at all equal. No, but Medon got absolutely hammered. They lost more or less. I think pretty much every trail had issues. Where further east at Ballow, we had one big enormous tree, two smaller ones, and that's pretty much it. So we actually expected it was going to be an awful lot worse. But it came from a relatively conventional angle, if you like. So Arwen was particularly destructive because it came the opposite way from the prevailing conditions. So everything just got knocked flat. And I bet last year the ground was really, really saturated. So everything was sort of fairly loose and muddy. And again, lots of stuff came and blew over. Whereas this time it was pretty much everything's about as good as you could have it, apart from the wind speeds. So, the ground was pretty solid. It's been a fairly dry winter. Or at least it was. It's not anymore. And it was coming from the direction it normally comes from. A lot of the weaker trees have been taken out already over the last few years. So it wasn't as bad as we expected it was going to be. And because it was quite well warned about and the weather then settled quite dramatically afterwards, we were able to go out pretty much the day after and go out and start assessing things. And so many just ordinary riders did likewise and started using Trailfox. We made a big, did a few bits and pieces of information posts beforehand about, if you're going out, stick stuff on Trailfox. If you let us know, you can either DM us, put it on Trailfox, so we know exactly what's going on. And we had pretty much a good picture of exactly what was going on within a few days. And as I say, we were able to pass that over to Forestry as well. So they had a pretty good list of certainly all the priorities that they need to work with. So at Duchney, where there's an actual proper built trail and the bike park, which is proper machine built trail centre style thing, forestry crews were out basically the morning after clearing all the big stuff. They had that all cleared and open within a couple of days. There's still a few trees down in some of the outlying bits, but basically all open. We had everything cleared at Ballow. Well, actually, the last trail that was closed, we just got open yesterday. Pit Medon, yeah, they've literally moved heaven and earth. I think Pit Medon the last couple of weeks. It's ridiculous the amount of hours that's been put in there, and they're now, I think, probably 75% all back open. It's more the outlying things. But we use Strava and Trailforks data to sort of prioritize what's busiest. So which we do anyway for maintenance purposes. And there's no point putting hours into fixing a trail that nobody rides. And certainly we have a few at Ballow that, there's about 5 people that ride it and they like it just the way it is. Thank you very much. It's a rooty, horrible, rocky mess, and that's what they want, and that's fine. Whereas there's other trails that get ridden almost like the sort of intro trail. It gets far more traffic, so we can prioritize things. So we're aware of what's busy and what to do priority wise. So we were able to kind of pretty much jump on things fairly quick. And I'm actually quite surprised how much we've got back up and running so quick. It's quite amazing, really, to be honest.
Did did you just do that as, obviously probably not normal dig days, but they were just sort of dig days running on normal times of day at weekends, or did you have to did you do stuff, at other times of the week that you wouldn't have done normally? How much?
We have over the last wee while, certainly, yeah. So we had a couple of dig days planned already, actually, as it happened. So we were kind of already had quite a lot of people with the time booked out to go and dig or to go and work on trails. So we were able to get quite a lot done initially. And obviously we had all Pitmen prioritised last weekend. And a couple of our, actually a fair number of our dig leaders work sort of shifts and odd patterns. So we're kind of quite able to distribute labour about if we need to. Again, it's just a function of there being so many people doing bits and pieces and able to work independently because we all have the training. It's not like there's a 2 or 3 people that have to do all the prep and everything. We have enough people that we can spread that load out quite effectively. And if there's 5 people available on a Tuesday and or 3 on a Thursday and then a couple at the weekend, we can pretty much accommodate that usually for the most part. Which at times like this, when it's kind of right, let's all go out and clear stuff. And I think pretty much everybody rides with at least one folding saw in their packs at this time of year, just for clearing the odd branch. And a lot of it was quite small. It's like just brash that's blown over or small trees. And for every big monster that takes 10 of you a whole morning to cut through, there's loads of stuff you can just drag off and throw out of the way. So yeah, it's still blocked, but it's 2 minutes with a folding saw to clear it. It's just having the right gear in the right place at the right time.
Okay, yeah. The Pitmen Trail Crews Facebook group, and it looked like there were people out every day clearing trails. It was amazing the amount of work that seems to be going in.
Yeah, it was amazing like how they've managed to pull that off so quick. I do know it's because my client's a human chainsaw, basically. He's completely determined to get everything back up and running, and utterly invested in managing keep. I'll let you know if you've seen his posts on there. He's very emotionally attached to the Pitmen trails in a good way. So he's definitely earned his shifts. He's one of the guys who doesn't really dig over the summer at all. He likes going out in the winter and doing all this, loves cutting down trees and storm clearance and all that. So he's in his element doing that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. To Mark's question, it is my client. And did you find? Obviously this was a big event. It was quite well publicised that your trails got hit quite hard. Did you actually attract many new people to dig days, or not?
So I think Pitmedden has, yeah. Pitmedden's actually been really quite busy over the last wee while, and I think it's basically down to being the easiest to get to from Stirling in the south a wee bit more. And they have been busy to the point where I got a phone call from Forestry and Land Scotland a couple of weeks ago asking if I knew of anybody organising unauthorised events there, because it's that busy. When the rangers showed up, you refused to believe that it was just that busy with mountain bikers there for the day. There had to be some kind of event happening that they didn't know about. But no, it is just that busy. So I think that's translated into having a few more volunteers. So I've not spoken to any of the guys there, but I think they have had a few people this weekend. They had a fair few new faces coming along. And again, it's just getting, if you get, for every person that comes along for the first time, some keep coming back time and time again. Some might just show up once a year. But we've kind of always made the point that if everybody that rode on our trails just came to one dig day in the year, we'd be completely sorted and we'd have no problems at all. There's so many people come riding. Just one day from each year, we'd be happy. And I think it is kind of starting to cut through a little bit now that there was definitely a bit of a boom of people new to the sport, obviously with lockdown and all the rest of it, and the rise of people publicising trails. a whole influx of people who maybe didn't have the same background of building stuff to ride stuff, who are now realizing that actually, wait a minute, this places like Pitmedden and Ballow and Dunkeld, it's not a trail centre. There's no crew of people. Like, it's not an official thing. This is just all volunteers digging stuff. If we don't, it's not just like no dig, no ride doesn't mean you shouldn't ride if you're not prepared to dig. It means there's nothing to ride if nobody digs. And these big storm events just highlight that, okay, if we don't get off our arses, nobody's going to come and deal with this. Forestry will clear the fire roads, but they're not going to clear the trails. They might do one or two, but it's on us as riders to do this. And that message, I think, is starting to cut through to enough people. We just have to make it as fun an experience as possible for people to come along. Initially, at least on the first couple. Once they're well and truly sucked in, we can torture them with dragging rocks through bogs all day. But we save that for the regulars. We like that kind of stuff.
You talked about using trail forks during the storm to get people to report trees. Well, there's a couple of questions from that. What did you said you were able to tell forestry where all the trees were down. I mean, was that new information to them? Was that the only source of information they had?
It's not the only source of information. No, they rely on, obviously they have their own crews who go and do stuff, and they have public reports from everything. But I think what is different about mountain bikers is that we are more invested in doing that. That it's probably the only demographic who will be like, oh, well, it's muddy and raining and horrible and snowing. Let's just go out and ride anyway. So it's the speed of getting all that information and having that central, there isn't a trail forks for people who walk their dogs, So dog walkers might send in the odd report, but equally they will probably say, oh, there's trees down on the path at Pitmedden. Right, okay, well, that's a big forest. Whereas because we can communicate to people ahead of time, here's what we want you to do. What we want is ideally as many photos as we can. If you can geotag them, great. If not, give us a rough location. So we're able to say, there's a bunch of trees, there's photos of them. This is exactly where they are, in a relatively coordinated way. And again, it's not 50 individual mountain bikers. It's 4 of us for the 4 areas. So I sent the reports for Ballow and Halliburton, Mike and Aaron did Pitmedden, and so on. So it's 4 emails rather than
And were you finding that actually you were telling FLS about trees down on fire roads just as much as trees down on trails? I mean that, and
absolutely,
and then cleared those,
yeah. So their priority is to clear fire roads and core paths. So I don't know if there's an equivalent concept down your way, but each council has a core path network that's adopted and maintained to provide access around. So basically, you can get pretty well anywhere you like off road if you try hard enough around here. So forestry, where core paths go across their land, they have an obligation to keep those clear. Councils out with those areas. So those are the bits that get prioritised, but those are also how we access the trails for the most part. So,
and also how emergencies would be dealt with by emergency.
Of course, absolutely, yeah. So, so it's important that those are kept clear. So we don't really prioritise them any differently from anything else, but it all feeds into the same system. So forestry will then look at how that works in terms of their priority, who's available to do what on what day. But the more information they have, the better they can figure that out and prioritize that. So that's kind of the benefit they get from having us on side, if you like. But if there's all these thousands of mountain bikers going out to the forests, then that's information they can use. And they get some free labour out of it occasionally as well, because if we can clear a fire road, then we will. We're not going to be like, oh, well, that's forestry's job. It's like, well, it's in the way right now, let's just clear it. So it does sort of cut both ways, I guess. But having all that information collated in the way that they want is also important. That it's not just a load of random reports. It's structured in a way that feeds into their system in a way that they can use and For example, they prefer grid references to what 3 words. So we know that. We can take that information. We might get the reports as what 3 words, but we can recycle that into a grid reference and give them the information in the way that they need it, which just speeds everything up.
So they may have access to Trailforce, but they don't really use that. You sort of translate that for them into reports, basically.
Yeah, they do use Trailforks to a degree. Certainly, all of our a fair number of the Trail GPX files have found their way into Forestry's GIS system, so they know where all the bike trails are. They can look at it just the same way we do. We keep that up to date and we'll supply them with information. And when they're doing felling plans, they can then look at that and be right. These are the trails. So we might get a call back from Forestry to say, right, we've got felling in this area. Which of these trails are important? Which ones do you really want us to try and save? And they can then maybe prioritize things around that a little bit more, which again goes back to our usage data that we have. So there's a little bit of trading, I guess, that's like, well, that trail, yeah, not really that important. Nobody really rides them, they're not that fun. Those ones are dead. There's a tree down over that one. Do I like in the area? Please try and save these ones. So it helps them to keep us on site, because I think Forestry are at the Forestry and Land Scotland are a company that harvests trees. That's what they're there to do. They don't really care about much else, but they do have various obligations and government strategies and things to get people into the forests and outdoor and all this kind of stuff, which at a departmental level, obviously they take very seriously, but at a corporate level, maybe not quite so much. So being able to have a neutral organization that can say to mountain bikers, look, we want you to keep out of this area, but they've agreed that if you keep out of this area, they'll try not to trash this bit. We have a not control, but we're not the big scary forestry machine. Likewise, like the guys in Lochaber are looking to become legitimate, I suppose. They don't have to come speak to Forestry, they come speak to us. And we'll speak to Forestry because we have that relationship already. It's less scary for them. And if a forestry contractor comes across some kids digging a trail in the woods, they can go speak to the Trail Association. And again, we're not scary. We're just mountain bikers. We dig stuff. We're not a big scary corporate entity. Not that Forestry are a big scary corporate entity, but
I do know what you mean.
We're a lot friendlier and a lot more fun.
And I don't want to dwell on it too much, but going back to Trailforks, do you use that normally as well, rather than just post storms? I mean, do you want to talk us a bit about how useful that is and what aspects of it you use?
It's actually been really useful because a lot of the tools, the admin tools and things, we can assign tasks to each other or to individual people. Now it's more set up for like bike parks and sort of big managed trail systems than it is for trail associations. But some of the things are still really useful. That those reports let us figure out exactly what we're going to do and see exactly what's going on, and it cuts down a lot of the just going and having a look, which is takes a time. To a degree you can do that when you're riding, but in some of the bigger areas like at Lochaber, but then it's a lot easier to just see a report. It also helps keep track of just what exactly is where, which areas are busiest. So yeah, it's a really useful tool.
So you actually use it for workflow as well, so sort of task management.
Yeah, we probably could use it more than we do, but it's a good tool to have there should we need it. It's definitely more for information gathering at this stage, but as a tool for engagement as well. If you go into one of our areas, you'll see TTA managed by TTA. Click here to donate, sort of thing. So it's handy as a marketing tool as well, and we can put people to that to get information. So when you scan the QR codes on reports, it'll take you to Trailforks. You can see what's going on where.
Got you. It makes sense. Yeah. And are you finding yourselves actually generating much many donations through Trail Forks? Because quite a lot of people say they don't hardly get anything off it.
It's more recently, but no, I think the majority of our donations just come in through the square payments, which is just a direct payment thing. There's no, but there is some comes through the trail karma thing certainly, but it's I think Trail Forks in Scotland has never been particularly well managed historically, and there's a few reasons for that, but it's only been in the last year, 2 years, I think, that they've taken a more active role in engaging with trail associations. And Mark, I don't know if you've had this as well. They've kind of reached out to engage with you and train up admins for each area who are actually based in and digging in the area, rather than having a sort of more hands-off approach. So a lot of the perception of Trail Forks has been that it's okay for finding trails, but it's not really much use for anything else. So recently they've made an effort to change that and get more engagement, and since then it seems to be getting more used. Hopefully that'll continue.
Cool. You talked about the possibility of you guys becoming a recognised sort of contractor as well as a trail association. Talk to us more about that. So what's the idea? Is you actually get set up on their framework as a company that they can spend money with to do the work, or they still wouldn't pay you anything, but at least you'd be allowed to have permission to do the work type thing.
That's kind of, it's a discussion that we've had. It kind of comes up every now and again of like, oh, well, yeah, you could maybe look at doing this, but there's always a but. So it's kind of like, you could do this, but you would have to register as this type of organization that can do this kind of thing. And it's figuring out what exactly those steps would be. It might be that it's far too much bother to be worth doing as a voluntary organization. But when you look at some of these big events, big storm events, that they are getting worse and they are getting more frequent. And it's going to become more of an issue that we're going to start running into problems that we just can't fix. And even just down to the certain high traffic trails, particularly the case if a well-known YouTuber takes a liking to one of your trails, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of people piling down it, rain or shine, and it will just get blown out in way beyond the ability for us to fix. But if we were an entity that could bring in imported materials, could bring in, barrows and diggers and all that kind of stuff, we could probably fix those. So there's two ways you can look at that. We can either build a new trail to replace the one that's gone or that's blown out and close the one, which, there's pros and cons to that. Or we need to look at ways we can keep those trails running indefinitely to stop them proliferating in other areas. So that's kind of where these conversations come from, that it's figuring out where we're at now is figuring out what that would look like if we wanted to get to that stage. And it's really complicated, and there's loads of steps, and there's potentially some costs in certain areas. But, if we keep pulling in more and more donations, and you kind of get to what does a trail association want to be? Are we just a bunch of volunteers who go and dig in the woods, or are we having a more broad-based stewardship role where we can take on bigger things? So that's kind of where it comes about. If you look at what guys down in Tweed Valley have done, they've now got two part-time employees who go out and do trail maintenance as a paid job, again, all funded by donations. So these kind of things, it's a sort of logical next step to be, well, we don't necessarily want to be a company like CRC or somebody like that, but is there a halfway point where we can take on some bigger jobs and do some bigger stuff? And what do we have to do to get there? Which is, I guess, where we're at with that.
And out of interest, is that just sort of one hoop you need to, is there just sort of one framework you need to get on, or are there like 5 or 6 different ones that would be useful to be on, and therefore you'd have to do it 5 or 6 times?
I think there's quite a few, yeah. To be fair, it's a bit of a maze of different permissions and things. So, yeah, it's a really complicated process, and it would complicate a lot of. It moves you away from that idea of being able to go, we can just go and do 1 or 2 bits and pieces, and we could still do that. But if we were an entity that could employ somebody to come in with a chainsaw and clear all that wind blow, we'd have to spell out a programme of works across the whole hill, and we'd have to fill in various documents, bits of paperwork, CDM, access restrictions, all this kind of stuff, a huge pile of things exactly the same as any other forestry contractor would. And it's whether that's something that's feasible for a voluntary organisation to do just because of the amount of work involved. Like, if we're only going to do it once a year, and it's going to cost us most of our budget to do it, is that really something we'd want to do? But the important thing at this stage is figuring out what that roadmap is and figuring out how we could do that. And again, it's good having a good relationship with forestry where we can talk through some of these things and just sort of kick the tires, I guess, and see like, well, if we wanted to do this, what would we need to do? What's the steps? How does that work? And then we can sort of sit down and think, right, okay, how do we really want to do this? But again, the more people you have involved, the more different skill sets you have involved. So if you have somebody who's running road building projects on Forestry and Land Scotland sites anyway, as their day job, if somebody from that contractor is kind of already used to a lot of that paperwork because it's such a big stretch. Whereas if you're all guys who are just building trails and running the odd race, that's a completely alien skill set. So, it's figuring out how that all works. But half the battle is knowing what the hoops are, which is where we're at just now, figuring out what sort of bits and pieces we would have to do.
Yeah, it makes sense. I wish you all luck with it. I think it's, as you say, it's the sort of logical next step to at least explore, even if you don't end up deciding to do it. But yeah, it would make a massive difference, especially if you've got enough funds flowing in.
That's the other side to it. You need the skills, the permissions, and you need the funding to do stuff. But I can see a crunch time coming up where the sort of big weather events and big traffic events, I guess, just of the sheer numbers of people riding, are kind of going to necessitate something quite dramatic happening. Because if you keep having increasing numbers of riders and keep having increasingly intense storms, there's only so much you can do as a voluntary organisation with hand tools.
Yeah,
I'll keep on top of it.
But it's also amazing what you guys have managed to achieve as a voluntary organisation with hand tools, because you had permission to do it. Like there's a really stark contrast between, how quickly you guys have recovered from the storm, despite, pretty severe damage to your trails, compared to, what's happened in parts of Wales where, because there aren't the trail associations with the relationships in place, those trails are still closed from storms last year, not this storm round. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also worth mentioning though that these sort of this wasn't that unusual. It was a bit worse than usual, but this happens every winter. We have one storm like this every winter, and we've had that since always. So we're kind of used to having to go out and gear up since we're getting better at it. But yeah, I think I've seen that from a lot of the threads you have on the things with what's going on in Wales, and it's that relationship that there needs to be a wee bit of give from, I guess, Forestry England and Natural Resources Wales, just to open up those conversations and be like, look, you guys aren't going away. People aren't going to stop riding bikes. People aren't going to stop building trails. How we need to reach out, we need to engage with this, which I think has happened in Scotland, and it probably needs to happen everywhere else as well, because it definitely works. Like I can't really see a downside for anybody involved to how things are done up here. Yeah, it could be a bit smoother, a bit more streamlined, things could get easier, but it more or less works to everybody's benefit pretty much.
I mean, maybe let's explore that a bit more, like your relationship with Forestry and Land Scotland, and what you're doing. I mean, like, as in, to use the Tweed Valley as an example, because I know that's a reasonably public situation where they have, there are obviously lots of trails all over the Tweed Valley, but they've, officially they started off with 2 trails, I think, they were maintaining, and now that's expanded greatly to quite a lot of trails, but it's still not the majority of trails that they're officially looking after, even though perhaps they are looking after some ones that they're not officially looking after. I mean, is it a similar situation for you guys, or is it different?
It kind of is, yeah. So we negotiate how that acts. We're actually negotiating through some of that at the moment, and it's always an ongoing discussion as to how that all works. And again, it's about getting things in a form that the land manager can understand. I suppose it's like almost like a different, not quite like a different language, but they have a set way of doing things. They have set boxes they have to tick. They have set criteria and assessments for how things work, and we have to kind of might meet that somehow, and interface with that in a way that works for them. You can't just be like, oh well, we're mountain bikers, so we're special. We have to look at what frameworks and permissions and systems they have already and see how we can sort of fit in with that and work from that. And once you're in that system and working in that way, you can then start to look at how you can expand that into other things like TVTA have done. They're kind of doing a similar sort of thing, I guess, that it's you start off with a certain set criteria that's quite rigid, and then as you demonstrate your ability to do things in a way that they're happy with and they're comfortable with, then and that goes both ways as well. If they were super restrictive about things, there might be things that we're like, okay, actually, we're not going to look at doing that kind of stuff because that's just going to cause problems in other areas. So it is just about developing that relationship, building that up, and that just takes time. Like, you're never going to get everything you want straight away. You have to work on things and build things up, and that keeps everybody happy.
In practical terms, how did that evolve? Did it start with like just one or two trails? Did it start with one hillside and then expand into some more trails, or another hillside? I mean,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So we have a few trails at each site, and then it sort of spills out from that. Yeah, exactly. And there is a degree of we have a process for adoption for certain trails. Yeah, and other bits that are, well, if we're walking up to this trail and there's a branch down over it, we might as well clear that bit. And it's but certainly any major tasks that we're doing is very much a pretty controlled process that we have to agree everything step by step, and we have site visits, sign offs, and all this kind of stuff. So,
but I suppose my point is let's use Pit Medon as an example. Are there certain areas that you guys look after because you've got permission to do, but then other areas where there are wild trails that you don't have permission to run dig days on, or have you now got permission to cover all of the trails? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, we have a degree of there's certain trails that are adopted that we work on primarily. Yes, absolutely. And then there's other bits that are kind of the Wild West.
Okay. And what percentage of the trails do you think you guys cover in each area?
Medon's probably a bit lower because it's quite a big area. But certainly at Ballow and Halliburton, I think are officially adopted trails. We have five or six at Ballow, and then another couple at Halliburton as well, which again are the high traffic ones. So you have to look at what is actually where the work's required, and adjust that accordingly.
Okay, makes sense. I think you've been so good at explaining yourself, Graeme, that you've preempted everyone's questions. So I think we might call it a day at that. I think. But look, thank you so much. It's been really good to learn about everything that you guys are doing. It certainly feels like there's a lot we can learn, and I think it'd be really good to touch base with you again in future once you've sort of explored the contractor route and drawn some conclusions about how you're going to move forward with it. Because I think there's it's a model that as you say, it's the next obvious step, not just for you guys, but I think for most trade associations at a certain point in their life cycle across the whole of the UK. But if you guys are one of those pioneering that approach, it'd be really good to learn from it.
Well, I think it might be a few years before we can get a definitive answer on that one, especially if it keeps blowing a hoolie every winter. But yeah, it's a process. The trails aren't going anywhere, so it's something we'll be working on for a long time to come still. But hopefully, it just keeps getting better every year.
Cool. All right. Well, look, thanks very much, guys. And I'll see you all next month. Hopefully some of you both on the call, and then a few actually just before the call, next month's call, will be at reframing. So perhaps not people up in Scotland, but anyone that's within reasonable travel distance to Bristol, it'd be good to see you guys. And if not, I will see you on next month's call. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.